We are back with the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast with our closer, Robbie Veno. We're going 189 on the rotation number to the end of the card. Get all Saturday's plays and bets, recommendations from Mr. Veno. Robbie, welcome into the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Drew. Glad to be here today. Another football weekend, so obviously pretty exciting. And, MLB Championship Series going off this weekend, too, so a lot going on. I think, not to ramble here, but I'm pretty sure that the NBA starts Tuesday. It's that time of year where we don't have 2 minutes to ourselves. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting to that time of year where it's great to be a sports bettor. A lot going on, not a lot of boring nights after work, and hopefully Sportsmemo can help you out, get you on the winning side. And guys, remember, Veno49 when you're checking out for half off Rob Veno's 7-day service. He's been killing it. College football has been great, hitting 60% on the year. Hopefully keeps it up going forward in the back half of the season. Robbie, let's start off, close it out here for the Every Game on the Board podcast. 189-190 Missouri, Alabama. This one in Tuscaloosa, cross-division matchup here in the SEC. 73.5 the total, 27.5 Alabama laying at home. Robbie, I think the stat here is Tua has 25 incompletions and 18 touchdowns on the year, if I'm correct on that. So Missouri defense, I know you know this program. I believe your son goes there or just graduated from Missouri. Whatever you got on Missouri program, does the defense have a shot at slowing down this Alabama offense?
It's going to be difficult, Drew, especially in the passing game here where, Mizzou's taken a unique approach to their defensive backfield in the regard that Barry Odom and staff have really recruited athletes and tried to turn them into defensive backs. I don't know that Mizzou has one true defensive back, maybe Sparks, but they don't have a whole core in that secondary of true DBs. And it shows up because while these guys are great athletically, they miss a lot of assignments, and we saw last week, even after Jake Bentley went down and in a monsoon, Mizzou still got beat up in the secondary by the backup quarterback, Sarnekia. So it could be troublesome here, the way Alabama has thrown the ball, the way Alabama – I think I saw they averaged 21.2 yards per attempt against Arkansas last week, which is just you scratch your head. That's mind-boggling. I don't know if the same number can be achieved, but I think with Jerry Jeudy and those guys, certainly Alabama can throw the football here. Question for Missouri in games like this, where their underdog is always, can they keep up with the more talented team point-wise? Drew locks down a couple of key receivers here. Nate Brown will not play. Their top receiver, Emmanuel Hall, will not play. So while it's a position of depth, there are limited options here on the outside for Missouri. I don't want to lay that many points with Alabama, certainly because Nick Saban has shown a tendency the last few games to really take their foot off the gas pedal, and Mizzou can always score, so you could certainly sneak in the back door with this Missouri team. So don't like the side here. Potentially the total is a play in this game. Just because Alabama seems to find their way to 50 almost at will. And if you're going to ask Missouri to get to 24, I don't know that it's that big of a deal, especially since right now, as people try to nitpick Alabama, the concern seems to be their defensive backfield. We'll see. I mean, I don't see much of a concern with Alabama. Maybe boredom is more of a concern than the players in their defensive backfield, although they do have a starter down in this contest, so that it could make a difference. But if I had to look, Drew, I'd probably look over.
Yeah, and actually on Sportsmemo, I did a video early in the week with Kelly in Vegas, and I'm on the over. Personally, I bet it. And, you touched on a couple things. One, if you had to to pick a weakness for Alabama, and it's not really a weakness, but if you had to pick, it would be the pass defense, the defensive backfield. And going against Missouri, that's one thing, they do have some injuries on the wide receiver position, but they can throw it around. Arkansas just put up 30-plus points. I think Missouri will be able to put it in the end zone a couple times, especially in the second half. And Alabama's definitely going to get theirs as far as, man, this offense is becoming almost unstoppable. So it's an interesting concept. And you're close to the Missouri program. Do you think that they have a shot to kind of put in 30-plus points here?
Well, the other good thing about their pass game, Drew, is the way they protect. That offensive line protects Drew Lock like Fort Knox. They've only allowed 4 sacks all season long, and when you consider that he's dropped back to pass 206 times, 202 without being sacked, it's pretty good numbers. Now, every team that they played wasn't a pass rush juggernaut, but they did play Georgia. They did play one of the Mountain West's best pressure front sevens in Wyoming. They played Purdue, who's not a great defensive team, but shows some pressure, South Carolina. So really, if you're just taking all components of their passing game and adding them up, sure. I think that if you're playing over in this game, like I said earlier, I think you got to make it to 24 with Mizzou, because Alabama can probably do the rest. And boy, we both hit on it. Saban's taken his foot off the gas pedal in recent contests when they've been up big, and Missouri has backdoor potential. So late scores could get this one up and over the number.
Yeah, and we've seen it with Alabama. I mean, Arkansas coming in the back door. Same thing with, I believe it was Lafayette before that. So as far as price-wise, Alabama's getting kind of expensive. If I'm looking at them, I would look more over the total. Robbie, staying in the SEC, we got 191, 192, Florida, Vandy. This number jumped off the board to me, Robbie. We got the Gators laying 7 to Vanderbilt. I thought it was short, but when you dig deep into it, I'm not so sure it is. It's kind of going to be a sleepy atmosphere. I believe 11 a.m. local time kick with the Gators laying 7 on the road here in Nashville, 50.5 the total. The Florida kind of struggling, or has struggled offensively. This 7 number, it might not be so short. What's your take on it?
Yeah, and it could be a real good atmosphere for Alabama or for Vanderbilt, Drew, even though most times you would think about it as an early start being somewhat of a sleepwalk type of game, but it's a big reunion weekend. I happen to know a Vanderbilt grad, and a lot of ex-Vandy, a lot of alumni are going to be there in the stands for that contest. So for people who are, over college age, who now have families and homes and whatnot, they don't mind going to an 11 o'clock game at Vanderbilt, where the 20-year-olds might have a more difficult time waking up from the night before. So I think that the atmosphere could be pretty good here. And the fact that Florida somewhat wears a bullseye on their chest now with their recent performances and their ascension up the SEC East Division, I think that brings a lot of energy to the crowd here in this game. Both teams obviously play in the same divisional contest. Vandy has given Florida problems in the past, and I don't know, despite some really big victories for Florida thus far on the season, I don't know, Drew, that they're to the stage offensively where we just go on the road and lay a touchdown or better than a touchdown to a team that can play defense the way Derek Mason's team can. Certainly he can come up with game plans to stagnate offenses that aren't ultra productive, which Florida, in my estimation, isn't yet. Florida's had a great season on the defensive side, and it might be difficult for Kyle Shermer to make consistent plays, but in this instance, maybe Vandy only has to make a few plays in order to stay close. Power ratings made the game Florida -8, which is where it opened. Money's carried it down to the 7 mark here. Vandy may have enough, Drew, to stay close, and it might be a difficult enough atmosphere, though certainly. And if you're rating the 14 SEC venues and the difficulty to go in and play at any one of them, Vandy probably ranks at the bottom of that list. But I think in this particular instance, there are extenuating circumstances that may make this a more difficult game for Florida than Dan Mullen would like it to be. And his team, we don't know enough about them yet handling success. So it's hard to make a judgment on whether Florida is starting to read the press clippings or whether Florida still has their nose to the grindstone. I know the head coach obviously has the ability to keep a team's nose to the grindstone, but a slip-up by Florida, maybe a win less than 7, wouldn't be too surprising.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, early start, like we said, and just spot-wise for Florida, coming off their biggest win in years at home, now going on the road, Vanderbilt, well-coached team, defensive team. I could see it being low-scoring and just kind of Florida getting out of there, kind of in a low-scoring affair, so I wouldn't want to be laying 7. But let's head out to the Big 12. We got Oklahoma State, Kansas State. Looks like the Cowboys laying 7 on the highway, 61.5 the total. Tough place to play, but Oklahoma State looks to bounce back. Robbie, how do you see it?
Yeah, because defensively, boy, as much as I early on this season praised the hiring of Jim Knowles, former Duke defensive coordinator, OSU brings him in to become more aggressive. Oklahoma State had used somewhat of a passive defensive approach, bend but don't break type approach. But they brought in Knowles, and aggressively they did well the first 2 games. And then they played the Boise State game, and they limited Boise State's offense. And I thought, boy, this defense is on their way. It hasn't been good since they hit Big Ten play. And Texas Tech lit them up. Kansas didn't beat them, but Kansas did well against them, scored 28 points. A team that just fired their offensive coordinator yesterday put up 28 on them. Oklahoma State comes back with another bad defensive performance last week. But KSU has not moved the football at all this season, Drew. But right now, kind of questioning how good that Oklahoma State defensive scheme is. It could be that it's the first year. It's only 5 games in. The defense hasn't gotten totally used to it yet, and maybe handling a team that doesn't necessarily have a humongous, explosive offensive playbook. Maybe a team like that is a good elixir for Oklahoma State in this matchup. But it's hard for me to back them right now. It really is with the defensive side. The pleasant surprise has been the offensive end of things for Oklahoma State. You would have thought that after losing Mason Rudolph, after losing James Washington, some big offensive pieces, that maybe Tyler Cornelius and company couldn't keep it going, but they have. Justice Hill's been great at running back. They lean on him quite a bit, and the passing game's been real good for Oklahoma State thus far this season, averaging 309 yards per game. They're going to test KSU. I think initially when I looked at the game, Drew, my inclination was to try this game up and over the total because of the flaws that I'm seeing now on Oklahoma State defensively, and thinking that maybe Bill Snyder can come up with a couple of plays. But it's low 60s for a total here, and just not sure I want to get involved. I don't want to get involved sidewise. I don't trust K-State enough this year to grab the 7 points, which is very surprising because I think to start the year, K-State looked a lot better on paper than what they've shown on the field. But both of these numbers seem to be in good places, so I don't know that I can get there with either side or total.
Robbie, let's head to Conference USA. We got UAB at Rice. Looks like the Blazers laying 16.5 on the highway, 52.5 the total.
Yeah, it's been tough on Rice now as we get toward the second third of the season here, or we're into the second third of the season here, Drew. They just, Mike Bloomgren, their new head coach who came over from Stanford with the Stanford offense, he's produced on the offensive side better than what people would have expected. But defensively, you can just see it week in and week out that this team is wearing down consistently, and that's not a good sign against a UAB team that really on offense has things clicking on all cylinders at this point in time. UAB against Louisiana Tech last week wins that game 28-7. La Tech, a team that beat North Texas the week before and held North Texas to 27. So you can maybe attribute some of that to a hangover or letdown spot, but I'd rather attribute it to UAB playing real good offense right now, and the defense has come around the last couple of weeks. Charlotte, I don't know that we can count too much of Charlotte, count too much of the 7 points they allowed to Charlotte, but still, UAB's only allowed 7 points in each of their last 2 games, winning by identical 28-7 scores. So I don't see much hope for Rice in this game. I think UAB is kind of flexing their muscles here as a team to reckon with inside that conference, inside that division. And like I say, as weeks go on and attrition settles in for Rice on the defensive side, the number of points and yards that defense gives up is going to start to increase, and it may start to increase here against UAB. So for me, it would be lay the points with Alabama Birmingham or don't play at all. If you're looking at the total in this particular game, you're staring at a number that's come way down from 56.5 down to 52.5, and I don't necessarily know that I agree with the huge line movement down, but I do know that there is some rain expected in the Arkansas game. I didn't check into Houston, Texas weather for Saturday afternoon, but there may be the possibility of some weather. The rain seems to be moving that direction from the hurricane yesterday. So perhaps that's a reason for the total going down.
Robbie, we got a big one in the SEC, a cross-division game here with Georgia traveling to Baton Rouge, taking on LSU, the 3:30 Eastern CBS game here. The Bulldogs laying 7.5 now on the road, open 7, so the key number now, you have to add the hook onto the touchdown. 50.5 the total. How would you look to bet the Bulldogs and Tigers here, Robbie?
Now, just the fact that the hook is now attached to the 7, Drew, kind of shows you. And I saw 8s earlier this morning, so it's come back a little bit. But it goes to show you how much pressure was put on that 7 by guys going to the window and pounding these Georgia Bulldogs. It's not something that bookmakers easily do, come off of a 7, but they've had to. Like I say, it got to 8, back to 7.5 here. A lot of support for the Georgia Bulldogs in this game. Offensively, certainly they're the better team, averaging over 240 plus, both throwing the football and running the football. LSU doesn't necessarily have a weakness, although they've been hit a little bit in that secondary, Drew. You know, Greedy Williams, obviously the main attraction in that LSU secondary, and it's a good group, but they have been banged a little bit by opposing offenses here, giving up 222 yards per game. So maybe Georgia tries to capitalize on that, but that means they have to protect their quarterback, which could be difficult here. I think when you break it down fundamentally, it's hard for me to not take LSU in these points, which would buck, like I say, where the money has gone so far. It's obviously come in on Georgia, but I think that LSU defensively, we just talked about atmospheres that are not very difficult to play in the SEC. This is not a night game in Baton Rouge, a middle-of-the-day game. I'm sure LSU would prefer to have this game in Death Valley at night, but television has it moved to 3:30 in the afternoon, so it won't be quite the same, but it'll be a great atmosphere for LSU and the most decent test for Georgia so far this year. If they can crack this LSU defense, then I think they might be on their way to a potential spot in that Final Four for the college playoff. I don't know. You know, Joe Burrow becomes your biggest question mark, the quarterback of LSU in this contest. Can he come through? Because I don't know that LSU will be able to run it real well against Georgia. They're going to have to throw it. A difficult game for me to play either way. I've liked Georgia as an over team for the majority of this season. Here in what could be a defensive struggle, it's kind of tough to get there, but 50.5 leaves the door open for the key number of 51. And to say a Georgia game can't hit 51 at this point in time, to me, is kind of ludicrous. I think any Georgia game could hit 51, so maybe we'll still give a look to this over, Drew. Sidewise, though, not too sure.
Veno 49 being the coupon code to get half off of Rob Veno's 7-day all access. That's $50 off. So Veno 49, that's VENO 49 at checkout for $50 off his 7-day all access. Will get you college football, NFL, NBA this week and next. Robbie, you just said LSU. You know, we were talking about home field, advantages. Vanderbilt being, in your opinion, the least in the SEC. Would you put LSU's as the strongest?
Boy, that's tough to say because there's so many strong ones there. But LSU at night, I think you would say, if you really wanted to get down to the specifics, I think you could say Baton Rouge at night, Death Valley at night becomes maybe the most difficult atmosphere to get involved with. I think any game, because of the talent level, if you play in Tuscaloosa, very tough. Florida, the Swamp used to be extremely tough. Maybe they'll bring that back. I guess to answer your question, short version, Drew, sure. LSU at night, I think might rate as number one, and by a hair, but I think it might rate as number one.
Yeah, there's a lot of tough ones, so I mean, it's kind of like picking needles. But yeah, I would agree with you. We got New Mexico State, UL Lafayette, and the Sun Belt, actually former Sun Belt matchup here before New Mexico State, I guess got the boot. But 68.5 the total. Lafayette laying 7.5 at home. How would you look to bet this one?
Yeah, surprisingly, New Mexico State had a lot of backing coming into the season. That backing faded because they got off to such a miserable start. But last week, the performance by quarterback Josh Adkins and the running of Christian Gibson came around again. And all of a sudden, New Mexico State here in midseason is building a little bit of really good form and could be difficult for UL Lafayette, which is a team that plays very little, if any, defense. This particular game has some really, really strong fundamental matchups when you look at the numbers, pass offense versus pass defense, run offense versus run defense. It would seem as if both of these teams could be able to hand off the ball and get gaping holes, especially ULL, Drew, with Trey Regis and company. ULL really, the philosophy changed a little bit with the coaching switch this year at Lafayette. When Billy Napier came in, he pretty much proclaimed that he was going to model everything he learned under Nick Saban during his time at Alabama, pretty much a pro-style run offense with play action to work off of that. And they run the football real well. I don't know that New Mexico State has the ability to stop them from doing so. I could counter by saying New Mexico State should be able to run on Lafayette as well. Who can pass it better? I think they'll both be able to pass too. That's why this total sits as high as it does right now at 68.5. It was open 63.5, and bettors have hit it hard and often, all the way up to 68.5. Now, I don't know that that's even enough. You're asking these two teams to get involved in a 35-34 game to cash your ticket. Theoretically, when you just break that down, it doesn't seem like a heck of a lot. UL Lafayette, after going through the trio of SEC teams that they had to play so far this year and SEC defenses, it's going to look at New Mexico State and think that this is just a walk in the park. So I like offense on both sides here. I don't know that UL Lafayette's problems on defense are correctable as of right now. So expect New Mexico State with Adkins having a hot hand right now to probably move the ball on them too. I don't know that I would play this game as far as side is concerned. If I had to, maybe you take the 7.5 with New Mexico State in what my mind figures to be a track meet.
And Robbie, you say Adkins having the hot hand. What do you mean by that?
Threw for over 400 last week. And it's, it was very that New Mexico State offense that we knew from last year. Was it Tyler Rogers, Drew? Who was
yeah.
I get the?
Oh yeah, that guy was good.
Right, and they had Larry Rose III, and we just expected that that within that system, maybe it was a plug and play type system, and it hasn't really turned out that way for this team up until now. I think that some things are starting to click. You read a couple of quotes from head coach Doug Martin, and it seems that it took some time, but maybe the offense is getting there now. And when you face a defense that allows over 500 per game, and you have a quarterback coming in, it's only one game, so maybe hot hand was a bad phrase to use, but I think that there's been a turning point, and maybe it's just because they're in Sun Belt play now, where New Mexico State may look to be better offensively week in and week out, something like what we're accustomed to seeing. I don't think it's going to get to the Tyler Rogers, Larry Rose days.
And it looks like the market agrees with you. I mean, this opens 63.5, bet up 5 points now, 68.5 the prevailing number. So should be a lot of points there in Lafayette. We'll go to the Big Ten here. 201-202 Michigan State at Penn State. 53 the total, with the Nittany Lions laying 13.5 at home to Sparty.
And you never know how these stories, Drew, are going to affect the team, whether they galvanize the team, whether they divide them even further. But this week can't be good for Michigan State when, you know, you have players talking about the locker room atmosphere is bad. And you don't get names attached to it. You just know that there could be something cancerous going on in there inside that locker room. And whether or not the reports that have come out this week, like I say, galvanize this unit, can Mark D'Antonio get these guys to play together? There seems to be a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blame assigned to other people, and it's hard to tell. I mean, you can't generalize or blanket statement these types of situations. They all end up being different, and it's a product of the personnel itself, what they choose to do on the field, and it's a product of the coaching staff. Can they get through to these kids? I know one thing. Penn State was lit up by their head coach, James Franklin, after that Ohio State loss, which that game was won in many ways by Penn State, except on the scoreboard that day. And James Franklin assigned blame to himself and all the way down to guys who sweep the floors at night. He blamed everybody involved. And with the bye week, just being here in the Pennsylvania area and the reporting and the media that's described what's going on there, it's been a tough work week for Penn State as James Franklin strives to get this program to an elite level. Says they're great but not elite. They're going to be ready to play. That much I know. Will the other side be as ready, or will the other side will the infighting cause problems on the field? The problems on the field have been bad enough on their own so far for Michigan State, never mind having exterior problems to go with it. I don't necessarily agree with this game coming down a full point, but I can understand it from a strict value end. If you're catching 14.5 with a team as good defensively, especially against the run as Michigan State, then 14 plus the half, there's value there to go ahead and take that road dog. But in my mind, Drew, the fundamentals tell me that Penn State can move the ball on any team and move it successfully on any team. Heck, they just moved it on Ohio State really well 2 weeks ago in this same stadium. You know, is Michigan State the same defense as Ohio State? I'm not really sure. Ohio State's got problems in the secondary, but Penn State might be able to light up this secondary as well. If I had to choose, I'd play the Penn State side now that it's under 2 touchdowns. Now you come back and get less than 14 here. You only have to lay 13.5. Total has come way down, 58 and down to 53, which somewhat surprising too, because Penn State, like I say, that offense, what Trace McSorley's been able to do after losing so many players on that offense and productive players, including Saquon Barkley, really, really is kind of amazing to me. And I don't know that Michigan State can stop them.
Guys, Rob Veno, overall record 31-21, 60% college football so far year to date. We got 4 games left, but just wanted to give him a shout out. 20 stars, 4-1, 80%. 15 stars, 16-8, 67%. Those are the 4 and 5% plays now on the new rating system. Rob Veno's a great choice. Going to get a lot of volume with him. At least, Robbie, 5 or 6 plays a week. Is that what you're going for, if not more?
Yeah, it's usually in that vicinity of 7 or 8 on a Saturday, and the 20 star is always there, backed by a couple 2 to 3 15 stars. So yes, certainly it's in that 7 to 8 range. Now we have a lot of buys going on, and it may get to a hair bit lower, but I'm not. This card was so loaded this week, Drew, that I'm going to stick with that 7 to 8 range.
All right, good stuff. And we're week 7, I believe, and 60%. So keep it up, man. And guys, remember the code VENO49 VENO49 at checkout for half off his 7-day all access. Robbie, let's head out west. We got 4 games left, all late night specials. 10:15 Eastern start here. Hawaii traveling to the mainland, not only the mainland, going to Elevation. Hawaii at BYU, 56.5 the total, with the Cougars laying 11 at home in Provo.
Yeah, and the big news out of Provo, just a couple of hours old, maybe 2-3 hours old, is that Tanner Mangum is benched for this game. They're going to go with freshman quarterback Zach Wilson. It'll be our first chance to see him on the field here as he takes over the offensive problems for BYU, Drew, I thought when they fired Ty Detmer, things would get better offensively. I believe the whole program at BYU thought it would get better offensively, but it really hasn't. BYU right now, 116.5 yards on the ground per game, 189.5 yards through the air per game, for a grand total of 306 total yards per game. In modern-day college football, you're not going to win with 306 yards unless you have, 18 NFL players on the defensive side of the field. And for BYU, they're pulling out every single straw right now to try and find a way to move the football. I don't know that Wilson's the answer. I know this. When you match up quarterbacks this week and Cole McDonald appears ready to play here for Hawaii, Cole McDonald versus Zach Wilson is a complete and total mismatch. Now, we saw last week what happened to Hawaii against Wyoming. A difficult defense once again. Wyoming presents some troubles on the defensive side, but the Hawaii team didn't have Cole McDonald, who's been great at quarterback so far this year. They had to go with true freshman Chevin Cordero, the newest prodigy from St. Louis High, Marcus Mariota's high school, and a kid who's run the run-and-shoot offense. But they only scored 17 points last week and had to come from behind with a late touchdown to win that game. Having McDonald back means everything. For BYU to face this run-and-shoot could be difficult. Now, BYU has faced a couple of real good offenses so far this season, but BYU much prefers to be defending a team that wants to run the ball first and maybe play short passing game. This game that Hawaii plays with the set of receivers that they have, John Ursua and company, guys are running all over the field, crossing patterns, verticals, whatever. I think BYU has a tough time keeping up. I think McDonald has a big day. I don't know what to expect out of the freshman Wilson. So for me, it would be Hawaii in this contest. The total seems to be the choice of the money right now because the game opened 51. We see it as high as 58 at Pinnacle, but I'll use a general universal number right now of about 57 across the board at major shops. That's all due, in my estimation, to Cole McDonald being quarterback at Hawaii. Once this news of Zach Wilson playing quarterback for BYU really gets out there, I think this total's coming down even further than 57. So we're going to see an awful lot of take back in that total over the next 24 hours.
And Cole McDonald's for sure playing?
From what I read, it seems more likely than not. Now, if he doesn't go, the total probably comes down even further if Cordero starts here and then you'd have two freshman quarterbacks playing against one another, and you could expect that if you like under right now, I'd be playing under right now at this price, because you won't get anything near this price if Cordero winds up being your quarterback for Hawaii in this game.
And are they true freshmen, Robbie?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
yes.
That's a big ask to put a true freshman in there. All right, hey, heading to the Pac-12. This one a little bit earlier of a start. Still a night game. UCLA at Cal. 52 the total. Looks like Cal laying 7 at home. What do you think about this one? Yeah,
UCLA hung around last week due to turnovers, but I don't put a lot of faith in what they did last week. It's still an extremely young team. I'm forgetting the exact amount of freshmen that are seeing the field for Chip Kelly. But when you watch them play, the miscommunication that we see on the offensive side, the misreads and missed assignments on the defensive side, I really think UCLA is probably further ahead of the game on defense than they are on offense. I think that's an obvious statement to make here. But they're going to play a hungry California team. For UCLA, it's certainly a step down in class from playing Washington last week. But for Cal, it's a step down in class as well. And I think what Justin Wilcox has done there at California, Drew, is really, really good. And I think they've had some difficult beats this year. I think they're better than their record indicates. Right now, they're averaging about 410 yards per game on offense and only allowing 331 there, plus 79 yards per game, which is a real good total for a team that's not a 5-1 team or something. So for Cal, I think the signs are much better than UCLA. Just to compare, those numbers that I just gave out on Cal, plus 79 total yards per game, the UCLA side is minus 96 yards per game. They don't move the ball consistently. Like I say, the amount of freshmen running around on the field, it'll get better for Chip Kelly, but I don't know that it gets better here. I'd probably look towards California in this game. Total 53 down to 52. No real opinion there.
Robbie, late night specials to close it out here. The last two games, we got Wyoming, Fresno State. Looks like the Bulldogs laying 17.5 at home, 43 the total.
You know, Wyoming's offense, Drew, is atrocious. I mean, Tyler Vanderwall at quarterback with all the accolades from his head coach that he gave him heading into the season and into that first game against New Mexico State, actually saying that he was a better quarterback than Josh Allen when he got Josh Allen, which may be true because Josh Allen wasn't really recruited by many people, if any at all. I think he had to go the JC route to begin with. So you start to think after that first game that maybe Vanderwall's okay, but the passing numbers on this team are ridiculous. It's a prehistoric offense, one of the few still remaining in college football, pro style, huddle, methodical. When you can't run the football, you can't play action, and when your quarterback's inaccurate, you really can't play action. They can't go downfield. I don't know what they're going to do against Fresno State here, but I do know that they play real good defense. And for Jeff Tedford's team, they're a hair bit inconsistent offensively. There are games where you watch them where they move the ball up and down the field, and then there's other games where, you know, McMarion and company are a little bit stagnant. So I don't know. Laying 17.5 doesn't thrill me. I don't want to take them with Wyoming because I know that offense isn't going to score any more than 13 points in the whole game. 31-13 cashes your ticket here with Fresno State. And, you know, if you get the best of the number, there's some 18s out there. So maybe 34-13 to be sure cashes your ticket here. And I don't know that that's, you know, that far-fetched to see as a final score in that game.
Yeah, we'll finish it up here. A good late-night Saturday night card with Boise State, Nevada. Mountain West matchup here with Boise State laying 16.5 in Reno, 61 the total. Robbie, finish us off with the Broncos and Wolfpack here.
Well, certainly an angry Boise State team. I mean, and, you know, saying angry, Drew, doesn't mean that they're so good that they're going to come out and score 70 points because they're angry, because we've seen Boise State lose twice to probably the two best teams they played all season long, Oklahoma State and San Diego State. And they played San Diego State with a backup quarterback and a backup running back. We talked about those guys yesterday. Some San Diego State beat writers think that with Agnew at quarterback, they're better than they were with Chapman. And the drop-off in running back hasn't been that big of a deal here for that team. That team just continues to play defense, and they shut Boise State down last week. The good news for Boise State is Nevada is not a shutdown defense by any stretch of the imagination. I think they give up 7.2 yards per pass attempt, and you should see Brett Rippon and company get back on track here as far as point production is concerned. Although I will tell you this, the coaching staff, whether or not it's a smoke screen, whether or not it's just coach speak, they did voice some concerns this week about having to face the second opponent in a row that plays the 3-3-5 defense. Now, the 3-3-5 defense employed by Rocky Long, who's an innovator of that system, and the 3-3-5 defense employed here at Nevada, personnel-wise, are like night and day. And you could play the same system all you want. If you don't have the players, the same players inside that system, it's not going to be as effective. So I think Boise State, for all their caution, hey, listen, they saw this defense last week in much better form. They probably know how to handle it here. In fact, the coaching staff said they missed a couple of plays that really could have changed the game last week. I don't think they're going to have a lot of problems moving the football here. And Nevada, we just talked about quarterbacks returning to the starters role. Ty Ganji did practice Tuesday, I think it was, and listed today, early this morning, as probable for this contest, which is really big for Nevada, Drew, because the drop-off between starter and backup at Nevada is blatant. And with Ganji at quarterback, it's a far better team. And, an offense in all respects. If you just look at what Boise State saw last week and what they're going to see this week, it's an entirely different defense. Boise State gets an advantage. They played a great defense last week. They're going to play a subpar defense this week. However, they played a subpar offense last week, and they're going to play a really good high-flying air raid offense this week. So I think you'll see Boise State give up more than 19 points. I think you'll see them score more than 13 points. The side on this game, the numbers come way down, 19.5 to 16.5. To me, that's based on Ty Ganji, starting quarterback for Nevada this week. He won't be 100%, but even at 85, he's better than most. And total's gone up from 58.5 to about 60.5 right now. So I think you might see some points in that game, Drew. I think Boise can score. I think Nevada can score. Those nighttime games in Nevada, and especially against Boise State over the years, have gotten a little crazy. If you date yourself back to the Colin Kaepernick senior year, or his final year at Nevada, they played a wild 3-4 overtime game where Nevada upset that team. So could be an interesting matchup. I think maybe there's a lot of points in that contest.
Yeah, remember, it was snowing that night. And that brings up another point. Any weather concerns across the country you think we need to worry about? It looks like this tropical storm system, as far as gameplay, I don't know if it's really going to affect any games. It looks like it will already be off the coast by Saturday morning. But anything else you think the listeners need to know about?
A couple that I saw, and it's not going to affect anything in the Carolinas. The Carolinas going to have good weather. The places I saw that'll be most effective, if at all, Drew, would be the Arkansas game against Mississippi, where they had better than 50% chance of rain during that contest. And like I said earlier, I didn't check that Rice game. Arkansas, Houston area, maybe, I'm not sure. But from what I saw out of all the games, I think that the Arkansas venue might be the one that has some trouble, if they have any at all.
And I'm glad you brought up Ganji being back is a big issue, because a lot of people don't realize, the starter's out and it's just, penalize the team. But that's only half the equation, because it matters who the backup is. And I agree with you. On this Nevada team, it is a big drop-off to the backup. So that was a great point there. Veno, obviously knowing a lot about college football, 60% on the year. Use coupon code VENO49 at checkout for half off his 7-day all access. Robbie, last question here. I know you know the kind of Division I AA, formerly known as Division I AA, FCS teams. What are you thinking? Anything catch your eye, tickle your fancy as far as betting any of that this weekend?
I haven't given it the complete and thorough look, but I will say this right off the bat. There's some teams in FCS football that play games like track meets. Last week, I happened to have a play on Davidson and Jacksonville going over a number that I think was 72, and it went, it wasn't quite getting there, and then the fourth quarter went wild, and it really got there. A team like Davidson that has already hit the 90-point mark this year, just running plays like crazy. There's some of those teams out there in FCS football that you can find and take advantage of. If we're just looking for a side, I'll give you a little tidbit here real quick, Drew, is that the Colgate Red Raiders are one of four now, unbeaten teams in 1AA FCS football. And their defense, when you look at their game totals week in and week out, when I first saw one about 4 weeks ago, I think it was 36, 37. I'm like, that's got to be a misprint. That must be the line. Not a misprint. The Colgate defense has been sensational. They're laying 11 to an Ivy League school, Cornell, this week. They're probably more than 11 better than Cornell at this point in time. Don't see Cornell scoring more than a touchdown. So maybe that's a game I'll get to. But I'm going to give it a much better look throughout this evening and into tomorrow and Saturday morning.
So Colgate, look towards Colgate, huh?
Colgate's been a real surprise in FCS football, and that defense just been crazy. I also, in my power ratings, I'll say this real quick, had Princeton rated a little bit higher than odds makers do right now. Princeton out of the Ivy League, another school to watch out for. Really a devastating offense and a really good defense there as well.
And is this line right? I'm looking at Sportsmemo odds right here. Princeton laying 40.5 to Brown.
Yeah, it opened, I think, because my power ratings line was right on the money with it. I think it was like 31.5 if you go back and check line history. And it immediately got hit, and it's gotten hit ever since. So, yeah, it's a correct line, but it doesn't take a lot of money to carry an FCS line, obviously. But what money that's been bet on that game has been all bet on Princeton. They've been that good. They were on TV a couple of weeks ago destroying Columbia at Columbia. And, for those who watched, you get a taste of what Princeton's all about. And have a wide receiver on that team, Drew, that's probably going to get drafted. So you don't think of Princeton as putting NFL players out there, but there's some Ivy League schools that do throw guys into the NFL. Princeton's got a good team this year.
Well, good stuff, Robbie. All the way down the card here. Best of luck with your bets this weekend in college football. We'll have you back on tomorrow for NFL, every game on the board, along with another handicapper doing half and half. But guys, remember the coupon code Veno49 at checkout. Half off Rob Veno's 7-day all access. For Robbie V, I'm Drew Martin. We'll be back tomorrow for NFL Every Game on the Board podcast.